Hey guys, tonight we start with something both familiar and utterly strange, the dark beginnings of dream science. Imagine lying in bed in some creaky wooden house centuries ago, a thin blanket scratching against your skin, and the night outside full of wolves, thieves, and no streetlights whatsoever. In that silence, when your mind drifts and conjures images that seem more real than real life, the big question always lurks. What on earth are these dreams supposed to mean? You might wake up sweating from a nightmare of being chased by wild dogs, or oddly refreshed from a vision of feasting with kings. And you wonder, did that mean something about tomorrow, or was your brain just bored? You probably won't survive this in the sense that the philosophers who wrestled with it back then rarely agreed, and sometimes got themselves tangled in arguments that made sleep itself seem dangerous. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and I'd love to know where you're tuning in from tonight, so drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start by wandering back into the shadowy world of the earliest written thoughts on dreams. In Mesopotamia, clay tablets described dreams as direct messages from the gods, little supernatural memos that needed interpretation before you dared make a decision. If you dreamed of rivers, you consulted a priest. If you dreamed of lions, someone probably decided your fate was about to change. Historians still argue whether these interpretations were deeply believed by common folk or mostly staged as tools of control by priests who loved holding authority. Either way, you picture yourself trudging across dusty stone streets to a temple where someone older than your grandparents peers into your half-remembered dream and announces, "Yes, you should definitely invade that neighbouring city." Convenient, right? The Greeks pick up the torch, or the oil lamp in this case. Aristotle muses that dreams might simply be echoes of your waking senses, a little less mystical, a little more, your stomach is noisy so you dream of thunder. Meanwhile, Plato leans into the idea that dreams can reveal hidden truths. You roll your eyes a little because philosophers always make things about hidden truths. But then again, maybe he's onto something. Who hasn't woken from a dream feeling like they were just handed a riddle they can't quite solve? There's one quirky tidbit from ancient Egypt that still turns heads. Professional dream interpreters who basically had one job: listen to your nighttime nonsense and make it sound useful. Talk about job security. Imagine showing up late for work and saying, "Sorry, Pharaoh. I overslept, but luckily I dreamed of your victory." Nice save. The Egyptians even compiled dream books, where different dream images had set meanings. If you dreamed of eating crocodile meat, it was a good omen. If you dreamed of drinking warm beer, not so much. Warm beer is rarely a good omen in any century. As centuries roll on, you drift into a world where science doesn't yet exist as we know it. People wonder if dreams are literal soul journeys, little nightly adventures where your spirit takes a walk outside your body. Historians still debate whether this was superstition or a genuine explanation for that eerie out-of-body feeling you sometimes get in dreams. Imagine yourself waking in a small hut, staring at the fire embers and whispering to your neighbour, "My soul flew to the next village last night." Your neighbour probably replies, "Yeah, mine too." And you both nod like that explains everything. Here's where the comedy sneaks in. Some ancient thinkers thought dreams were caused by leftover food fumes floating up to your head. Picture that. You munch on onions at dinner, and suddenly your brain gets filled with onion vapour strong enough to spark visions. No wonder nightmares were blamed on indigestion. Fast forward to today and you'll still hear people say, "Don't eat cheese before bed, or you'll dream weird." The persistence is impressive, even if the science is questionable. But the shadows of those early centuries also remind you how fragile human sleep was. Without locks or reliable warmth, every rustle in the dark carried danger. Dreams became a coping mechanism, visions that made you feel like there was order in chaos, that someone out there was whispering instructions through the fabric of night. Yet, even as people clung to dream meanings, skeptics walked alongside them. A few sharp minds suggested dreams were just echoes of the day, shadows of thoughts you hadn't finished, not divine, not dangerous, just the brain being itself. You imagine yourself perched by an ancient fire, eyes heavy, the smell of smoke thick in your hair. Someone asks you what you dreamed. Do you share? If you say you dreamed of hunting success, people cheer. If you dreamed of disaster, the mood sours. Suddenly, your private nighttime movie has public consequences. That's the power these early cultures gave to dreams. They could start or stop wars, bless or curse harvests, shape entire communities. No Netflix subscription required. Just close your eyes and let the dream channel roll. Even now you sense the irony. The further back you look, the harder it is to tell if dream study was about curiosity or control. Dreams were mysterious, yes, but they were also convenient. Leaders leaned on them, priests profited from them, and everyday people feared them. The truth? Historians still argue whether the fascination was more spiritual than political, but either way, these were the dark beginnings of dream science, a time when no one knew where dreams came from, but everyone agreed they mattered. And so, as you let your own eyes grow heavier, you trace that hazy line from ancient temples and smoky firesides to the edge of the next great chapter. Because if you thought onion vapor was a strange explanation, just wait until you see how priests in marble halls began using sleep itself as a kind of hospital. You shuffle forward through the centuries, leaving behind clay tablets and smoky huts, and suddenly you find yourself stepping into a vast stone chamber. The air is cool, scented faintly with incense and damp limestone. You're in an Asclepieion, an ancient Greek healing temple where sleep wasn't just a nightly necessity, it was the medicine itself. Here, people came not for potions or surgery, but to dream. They would lie on hard stone floors or thin mats, waiting for the god Asclepius to visit their dreams and whisper cures. You picture yourself tucked uncomfortably on that cold stone, trying to drift off while someone nearby snores like a mule. Sleep as therapy sounds like the world's worst spa day. This practice was called incubation, and the logic went like this. If dreams were messages from gods, then surely those dreams could reveal how to heal you. A feverish traveller might dream of a snake slithering across his body, and the priest would announce, "Good news, the god has removed your sickness." Never mind that the snake probably just crawled across him in real life. Details. Historians still argue whether these dream cures actually work through some placebo effect or whether it was just clever theatre to keep faith strong. The temples themselves were half clinic, half stage set. Imagine long colonnades lined with flickering torches, murals of divine healers painted in brilliant colours, and quiet attendants moving through the night. If you're thinking this sounds a bit creepy, yeah, you're not wrong. You drift off in a cavernous room filled with strangers, each waiting for a godly house call, and you just hope the person next to you doesn't start talking in their sleep about goats again. One mainstream fact here is that Hippocrates, the so-called father of medicine, didn't dismiss dream healing outright. He noted that dreams often reflected bodily conditions, fever, indigestion, or even the early stages of illness. In his view, a dream about drowning might mean your lungs were filling with fluid. It's both chilling and oddly intuitive, like your brain is running a health check while you're offline. But then there's the fringe tidbit. Some priests actually staged dream encounters by releasing sacred snakes into the dormitories. You'd wake up half sure you'd met a divine creature, while in reality it was a well-fed temple serpent doing its rounds. Nothing says holy visitation like a cold reptile brushing your leg at 3 a.m. Makes you almost grateful for modern hospitals, emphasis on almost. What's striking is how communal it all felt. Your dream didn't just belong to you, it became part of a shared ritual. After waking, you'd shuffle to a priest, describe every weird fragment. I saw a bird made of fire, then my mother gave me olives, and the priest would nod gravely, translating nonsense into prophecy. It's basically the original group therapy session, except with more marble and way fewer chairs. Historians still debate how effective this system was. Some point out that patients often reported improvement after incubation. Others suggest the long journeys to these temples, combined with fasting, chanting, and sheer exhaustion, might have pushed people into altered states of consciousness. You weren't just dreaming, you were primed to dream big. Your body, deprived and suggestible, served up visions vivid enough to feel like healing. Of course, there were skeptics even back then. A few sharp-witted philosophers grumbled that temples were making a business out of sleep. You drop a coin, lie down, mumble about snakes, and suddenly the priest has an answer. It's hard not to smirk at the idea that ancient insurance companies might have refused coverage for divine dream consultation. Still, walking through those ruins today, you can almost feel it. The quiet reverence, the belief that sleep was a sacred doorway. And in a way, maybe they weren't entirely wrong. Modern science shows us that sleep really does help the body repair itself, and dreams sometimes reflect our mental and physical health. Strip away the divine snakes, and you're left with something timeless, the human conviction that what happens behind closed eyelids can change what happens when you wake. So there you are, stretching out on your slab, incense smoke curling above, hoping for a healing dream. The night grows heavy, the torches burn low, and you wonder what image the god will send. A snake? A bird? Or maybe just a reminder that stone floors are terrible mattresses. As you blink and drift further into that temple air, you realize the story of dream science has only just begun. Because once you step out of these marble halls, you'll wander into a world where dreams aren't only sacred, they're terrifying. They'll belong not just to healers but to demons and saints, carrying warnings of eternal punishment or eternal salvation. And suddenly, the comfort of a temple snake feels downright cozy. You step out of the marble corridors of the Asclepian and into the dim, candlelit world of the Middle Ages. The air feels thicker, the shadows longer, and the way people talk about dreams takes on a darker hue. Where the ancients once saw divine cures and cryptic health reports, medieval folk often saw something far more sinister: demons slipping into your bed at night, angels testing your soul, or visions of heaven and hell served up like medieval cinema. Picture yourself in a drafty stone cottage, the thatched roof creaking overhead, the smell of smoke and livestock lingering in the air. You stir in your sleep, dream of flying through the night sky, and wake in a panic because your priest has warned you. Flight dreams mean witches might be dragging your soul out to their Sabbath. Sweet dreams, right? You probably won't survive this century if you tell the wrong person about that dream, because suddenly you might be accused of consorting with the devil. Mainstream religious texts didn't take dreams lightly. Augustine of Hippo, one of the great church fathers, wrote extensively about dreams, wrestling with whether they were harmless, divine messages, or dangerous temptations. For him, the moral weight of a dream mattered. If you sinned in your dream, was that your soul actually failing? Historians still argue whether medieval theologians genuinely believed you were guilty for dream sins, or whether they used the idea to keep congregations nervous and obedient. Either way, you can imagine medieval folks lying awake wondering, am I going to hell because I dreamed about stealing a loaf of bread? And then there are the incubi and succubi, demonic figures said to visit sleepers at night. The incubus would smother you, pressing on your chest until you couldn't breathe. The succubus, well, she had other motives. Ones we'll politely summarize as unholy bedroom visits. Medieval dream manuals frame these experiences as spiritual warfare. Today, of course, we call this phenomenon sleep paralysis, a moment when your brain half wakes while your body remains frozen, often accompanied by eerie hallucinations. But back then, if you felt a crushing weight on your chest in the middle of the night, you didn't blame neurology. You blamed Satan. Quirky tidbit. Medieval monks sometimes treated bad dreams with relic therapy. You'd sleep near the bones of a saint, hoping the holy presence would scare away demons. Imagine dragging your straw mattress next to a glass case holding someone's finger bone, whispering, "Please protect me from nightmares." Creepy, yet comforting, in a way. Not all dreams were sinister, though. Saints were believed to appear in visions, offering guidance, healing, or encouragement. Pilgrims often reported dreams where a saint told them exactly which shrine to visit. Dreams became a tool of religious marketing. You dreamed of St. Catherine, and suddenly you were packing your sandals for a long, donation-heavy walk to her relics. The tension between holy and unholy dreams created a strange double standard. If your dream aligned with church teaching, it was considered divine revelation. If it didn't, well, clearly the devil was meddling. Convenient system, right? Either way, your nighttime imagination could elevate you to saintly status or condemn you to suspicion. Historians still debate whether ordinary villagers took these interpretations literally or played along to avoid trouble. After all, survival in the Middle Ages often meant nodding when the priest nodded. Daily life also fed into the dream world. A peasant who laboured in the fields might dream of endless furrows or golden harvests. A knight might dream of battles, armour clanking in surreal loops. These dreams were rarely written down, but you can imagine their texture. Muddy boots, clattering hooves, the sound of bells marking hours even inside the mind. Dreams were both escape and echo, both frightening and familiar. And then there were the nightmare creatures, literally nightmares. The word mare here didn't mean horse, but an old Germanic spirit said to ride you at night, sitting on your chest, squeezing the breath from you. The image stuck so powerfully that we still use the word today. You can almost feel the superstition seeping into language itself, shaping how we talk about bad dreams centuries later. But humour sneaks in, even in grim times. Some medieval dream books listed highly specific interpretations. Dream of cheese, expect a quarrel, dream of apples, watch for betrayal, dream of wearing someone else's shoes, big trouble. You chuckle because, let's face it, if you wore someone else's shoes in the Middle Ages, you probably were in big trouble. They only owned one pair. By the time the Middle Ages stumbled toward their close, dream science or dream superstition, depending on your perspective, has woven itself tightly into religious life. Dreams are warnings, temptations, revelations, and confessions all rolled into one. People sleep nervously, knowing their private visions might have very public consequences. You, standing there in the flicker of candlelight, wonder if you dare tell anyone your dreams at all. Better to stay silent, maybe, than risk a demon label. Still, in all this fear, you see the seeds of curiosity. Scholars copy down dream accounts, monks puzzle over their meaning, and ordinary people whisper their visions in kitchens and fields. Beneath the fear, something else stirs. The possibility that dreams are worth studying, worth writing down, worth more than just judgment. That curiosity will carry into the Renaissance, when dream notebooks and bizarre experiments begin to creep into the light. But for now, you curl beneath a rough wool blanket, cross yourself, and pray that tonight's visions lean saintly, not satanic. You leave behind the flickering candles and smoky cottages of the medieval world and step into a brighter, louder place, the Renaissance. It smells of ink, parchment, and fresh-cut wood. Printing presses are chattering like restless birds. Scholars are scribbling furiously, and the world feels like it's waking up. Dreams are still mysterious, but now, instead of being whispered in fear of demons, they're starting to be written down, catalogued, and, sometimes, sketched like science experiments waiting for answers. Imagine yourself at a long wooden desk, a quill in your hand, scratching words into a leather-bound notebook by candlelight. You've been instructed by physicians, philosophers, or maybe just your own restless curiosity to record every dream you have. Last night I dreamt of a ladder reaching the stars. You might write. Half convinced it meant divine ascent. Half aware it might just mean you tripped climbing stairs yesterday. Renaissance thinkers loved their notebooks, and dreams suddenly became data, raw material to puzzle over. One mainstream fact here: Leonardo da Vinci himself kept notebooks where dreams and waking inventions blurred together. He speculated about flying machines, water systems, even fantastical weapons. While not all of these came from dreams, his restless habit of imagining during half-sleep, or what we'd now call hypnagogia, may have seeded his genius. Historians still argue whether his doodles of bizarre machines were inspired by dreams, or whether his constant tinkering simply spilled into sleep. Either way, you can almost picture him waking from a wild dream of mechanical wings, muttering, "Yeah, I can build that." Spoiler, he couldn't. But hey, dream big. Then there were the true oddballs of the era. People designing dream machines. Some scholars built devices meant to trigger certain dreams by manipulating the senses. A tinkerer might leave scented herbs under the pillow, or strange contraptions that dripped water to spark specific imagery. The quirky tidbit. There's record of a Renaissance scholar who thought placing raw meat by your bedside could influence dreams, which is hilarious, but also terrifying, because in a world without refrigeration, you'd wake up not with divine visions, but with rats as bedfellows. Not exactly the inspiration you were hoping for. And while the Middle Ages had demon-haunted dreamscapes, the Renaissance introduced new obsessions, astrology and alchemy. People looked at their dream images and linked them with the stars. If you dreamed of gold, maybe it was an alchemical sign of transformation. If you dreamed of Saturn, maybe it foretold melancholy. Dreams became part of a giant cosmic jigsaw puzzle, where the heavens and the unconscious work together to send coded messages. You imagine yourself lying under a painted ceiling full of stars, waiting for your midnight visions to sync with planetary alignments. The invention of printing gave dream books a new life. Guides circulated widely, filled with A to Z interpretations. Dream of dogs, expect loyalty. Dream of fire, prepare for conflict. Dream of fish, wealth is coming. These books were half entertainment, half superstition, but they spread like wildfire. Suddenly, dream interpretation wasn't locked in monasteries or elite temples. It was in the hands of merchants, bakers, and anyone who could buy a cheap pamphlet. In a sense, this was the first mass-market dream app, only with way worse user interface. Historians still debate how seriously people took these manuals. Were they genuine tools of guidance, or just the Renaissance equivalent of tabloid horoscopes? Perhaps both. Some people swore by them, while others mocked them. You can picture scholars rolling their eyes at peasants who claimed a dream about cabbage meant their cousin was plotting betrayal. Then again, even modern folk still peek at dream dictionaries, so maybe we haven't evolved as much as we'd like to think. What makes the Renaissance so fascinating is the blending of worlds. On one hand, you have physicians experimenting with diet and lifestyle, noting how rich meals lead to heavy, strange dreams. On the other, you still have whispers of divine revelation. You're caught between science and superstition, rationality and wonder, scribbling down your night visions in hope of catching something meaningful. And in those notebooks, something else begins, the first serious curiosity about the mechanics of dreaming. Not just, what does it mean, but how does it happen? If you fall asleep after staring at an image, will it appear in your dream? If you sleep in silence versus music, does the tone of your dream change? These were baby steps toward psychology, taken clumsily but sincerely. There's humour, too, tucked between the serious ink. Some Renaissance diarists recorded embarrassingly trivial dreams. One nobleman wrote at length about dreaming he was arguing with a goose. You imagine his servant patiently copying this down, wondering if perhaps his master should dream of humility instead. So here you sit, quill still in hand, staring at the candle stub. Your dream notebook fills slowly, a patchwork of visions, fears, and nonsense. Tomorrow, maybe you'll take it to a scholar for interpretation, or maybe you'll just keep it locked away, amused at how the mind creates nightly theatre without props. Either way, you're part of a shift. Dreams are no longer just holy warnings or demonic tricks. They're becoming puzzles, things worth recording, comparing, and sharing. And this shift matters, because soon curiosity will overtake caution. The Renaissance fascination with notebooks will spill into the Enlightenment, where dreams aren't only written down but poked, prodded, and shocked with the newest inventions. If you thought raw meat by the pillow was odd, just wait until you see what happens when electricity and magnets enter the dream lab. You leave behind the quiet scratch of quills and the smell of ink-stained notebooks, and suddenly the world feels brighter, louder, and a little more reckless. It's the Enlightenment, and everything is an experiment. People are poking frogs with electricity, waving magnets over patients, and inventing contraptions so strange they look like props from a steampunk fair. Dreams are no exception. If you can shock it, weigh it, or chart it, someone out there is going to try it on sleep. Imagine you're stretched out on a rickety wooden bed in a candlelit chamber, while a man in a powdered wig leans over you with a brass instrument that hums faintly. "Just relax," he says, which is never reassuring. He waves magnets over your chest, sprinkles herbs, and maybe even sneaks a jolt of static electricity onto your wrist. The question buzzing in his head: can we influence your dreams by tinkering with your body? You're not so sure you want to find out, but hey, it's the 1700s. Ethics committees haven't been invented yet. One mainstream fact: the Enlightenment was obsessed with mapping cause and effect. Physicians like Julien Offray de la Métrie argued that the human mind was nothing more than a machine, a kind of fleshy clockwork. Dreams, then, weren't divine messages but mechanical malfunctions. Or maybe just the gears grinding in your sleep. Historians still argue whether these thinkers genuinely believed dreams were meaningless, or whether they left room for mystery to sneak in around the edges. Either way, you can feel the shift, from sacred to scientific, from temple to laboratory. Here comes a quirky tidbit. Some Enlightenment experimenters swore that copper wires placed around the bed could conduct dream energy. Imagine building a little electrical fence of wires around your pillow, half hoping it would give you visions of flying through the stars, only to wake up with tangled hair and a sore neck. Still, the idea that dreams were energy, something almost physical, was seductive. After all, electricity itself was new and magical, so why not believe it had a hotline to the unconscious? Meanwhile, magnets were the rage. Doctors experimented with magnetic sleep, waving lodestones over patients until they fell into trance-like states. Sometimes it worked, probably more hypnosis than magnetism, but it looked impressive. You lying there, eyes fluttering, muttering about visions, while a physician proudly takes notes. Patient dreamt of waterfalls after magnet application. You can't help but laugh imagining a wigged gentleman scribbling furiously about how to reproduce waterfall dreams at scale. Of course, not all Enlightenment dream experiments were so flashy. Some researchers took the humble route, keeping meticulous records of how food, temperature, and sound affected their dreams. A heavy meal meant heavier dreams. A cold room led to more vivid nightmares. Falling asleep to music sometimes sparked dream concerts, which sounds fun until you realize the harpsichord is stuck on repeat. These observations, mundane as they sound, were the start of recognizing that external stimuli could shape the internal dream theatre. Historians still debate whether these Enlightenment experiments were science or showmanship. The line was blurry, public demonstrations were popular, and people would pay to watch someone put to sleep with magnets, or jolted awake with static shocks, theatrics mixed with inquiry, and sometimes the dream itself was less important than the spectacle. You can almost hear the applause when a subject claimed, "I dreamed of lightning," after being zapped by a Leyden jar. Talk about audience-pleasing results. But there was also fear lurking beneath the fascination. If dreams were mechanical, if they could be manipulated, did that mean free will was an illusion? Were your nighttime visions just the product of wires, fluids, and brain gears? The Enlightenment mind wrestled with this unsettling thought. Some leaned into it, treating humans as elaborate machines. Others insisted there was still a spark of the divine untouched by copper wires and static sparks. The debate never really ended. It just keeps evolving into today's neuroscience versus spirituality tug-of-war. Humour finds its way into the story, too. One pamphlet described an anti-nightmare machine that looked suspiciously like a head cage with springs. You imagine someone wearing this bizarre contraption, trying to sleep while looking like a rejected knight from a comedy play. Did it work? Absolutely not. But it probably made your bedmates laugh hard enough to forget their own nightmares. As the Enlightenment marched on, dream science was still half-baked, equal parts serious observation, flashy trickery, and wild imagination. But one thing was clear. People were no longer satisfied with shrugging off dreams as divine whispers or demonic tricks. They wanted mechanisms, patterns, and proof. And if that meant putting volunteers in electrified cages, well, so be it. So you stretch, shake off the static, and glance around at this buzzing new world of science and spectacle. Because just ahead waits a man who will take all this magnetic fascination and push it further. Dazzling crowds with trance states that blur the line between sleep, dreams, and suggestion. You're about to meet Mesmer, the showman who believed magnets could guide your very soul into dreamlike sleep. You shuffle onward from the world of copper wires and Enlightenment gadgets, and soon the hum of static electricity gives way to velvet drapes, candlelit parlours, and the polite applause of fashionable audiences. Welcome to the age of Mesmer, a man so flamboyant he practically invented the phrase, "you had to be there." Franz Anton Mesmer, 18th century physician, believed he had discovered a universal force that flowed through all living beings, something he called animal magnetism, and yes, he meant that literally. He thought magnets could align your body's invisible fluids and, in the process, change your dreams, your health, and your entire vibe. Picture it. You're reclining in a Parisian salon, chandeliers glittering overhead, while Mesmer himself sweeps into the room in a silk robe that screams, "I know something you don't." In the centre sits his famous bouquet, a large tub filled with iron filings, glass bottles, and water, with iron rods poking out like some mystical porcupine. Patients, wealthy socialites, nervous scholars, and the curious elite gather around, grasping the rods, waiting to feel the magnetic current. Someone begins to sway. Another gasps, and before long half the circle is in trance-like states, moaning, twitching, or drifting into dream-like reveries. Mainstream fact: Mesmer became a sensation in Paris around the 1780s. His demonstrations drew crowds and divided opinions. Some swore he cured their illnesses and gave them blissful, vivid dream states. Others dismissed him as a fraud. Historians still argue whether Mesmer genuinely believed in animal magnetism, or whether he knew it was largely suggestion at work. Either way, his performances became the foundation for what would later evolve into hypnosis. The quirky tidbit? Mesmer's salons weren't just medical, they were theatrical. Musicians played glass harmonicas, an eerie instrument made of spinning glass bowls, to set the mood. And Mesmer sometimes wore lavender silk and locked eyes with patients, as if he could magnetize them through sheer charisma. You imagine yourself holding one of those iron rods, feeling nothing at first, then realizing that the mood, the music, and the group hysteria are tugging you toward a dreamlike trance. Modern scientists would call this placebo or suggestion, but in that moment, it feels like magic. One of Mesmer's obsessions was magnetic sleep. He claimed he could guide patients into dream states that revealed hidden truths about their health or psyche. Imagine someone in your circle suddenly collapsing into a trance, murmuring visions of celestial rivers or mysterious gardens. Everyone gasps, scribes take notes, and Mesmer nods knowingly. For patients, these dream states were cathartic, sometimes even healing. For skeptics, they were stage tricks fueled by expectation. But regardless of the cause, the effect was undeniable. People dreamed more vividly in Mesmer's presence. Historians still debate how much of Mesmer's success was due to genuine psychological phenomena and how much was social theatre. After all, these salons were elite gatherings where fainting and swooning were practically hobbies. When one person fell into a trance, others often followed, swept along by suggestion. Yet, buried in the showmanship was a glimpse of something real. The human mind could be nudged into dreamlike states without sleep, hinting that dreams weren't locked away but could be coaxed into daylight. Of course, Mesmer wasn't universally adored. Critics mocked his magnetic tubs, and eventually a commission led by Benjamin Franklin himself investigated his claims. The conclusion? There was no evidence of animal magnetism, only the power of imagination. It was both a public embarrassment and a strange victory, because the commission essentially admitted people really were being affected, they just weren't being magnetized. Instead, their minds were doing the work. And here's where the humour sneaks in. Imagine Franklin, kite and lightning Franklin, sitting there while Parisian aristocrats flop around in dream trances, rolling his eyes and muttering, it's all in their heads. Which, of course, was exactly the point. Mesmer eventually faded from Parisian fashion, but his ideas spread, his followers, the mesmerists, carried on, experimenting with induced trances, healing dreams, and the possibility of planting ideas into a sleeping mind. You can almost trace the lineage. Mesmer's bouquet becomes Victorian hypnosis chairs, which later become modern sleep labs wired with electrodes. Each era thinks it's discovered something brand new, but in reality, it's the same fascination dressed in new costumes. So you lean back in that velvet chair, the glass harmonica still echoing in your ears, and you realise something important. Mesmer's legacy isn't the magnets. It's the reminder that suggestion, atmosphere, and expectation can bend dreams. The human mind is shockingly pliable, and sometimes believing is half the experience. You stand, shake off the trance, and leave the salon. Ahead lies the 19th century, where dream diaries will multiply. Victorian minds will obsess over nocturnal visions, and dusty volumes will gather in libraries as people try to capture their nightly movies with relentless precision. Compared to that, Mesmer's bouquet feels almost quaint. You step away from the fading echoes of Mesmer's glass harmonica and find yourself wandering into a different kind of parlour, one less filled with silk robes and magnetic tubs, and more cluttered with leather-bound journals stacked high on rickety desks. It is now the 19th century, the Victorian era, a time when people were obsessed with cataloguing everything. If it moved, they measured it. If it didn't, they still measured it. So naturally, when it came to dreams, Victorians did what Victorians always did. They wrote them down, endlessly, in diaries that became both intimate confessions and makeshift scientific experiments. Picture yourself in a candlelit bedroom. On the nightstand sits a quill, a blotter, and a small notebook, the pages filled with looping cursive. A middle-class gentleman bolts awake from a dream about, say, chasing a golden stag through misty moors. Instead of rolling over, he reaches for his diary and scribbles frantically before the vision fades. His wife, meanwhile, records her own dream of flying across Europe in a balloon, long before she's ever stepped foot in one. These aren't isolated moments. Dream diaries became a Victorian pastime, almost like competitive journaling. Who could capture the strangest dream before breakfast? Mainstream fact. Throughout the 19th century, scientists and ordinary citizens alike kept dream journals, hoping patterns would emerge. Some believed dreams foretold illness. Others thought they were divine messages. Historians still argue whether Victorians took the content of dreams seriously as supernatural signs, or whether they were more interested in them as curiosities of the mind. Either way, the sheer volume of writing is staggering. Whole families pass dream notebooks down generations, like heirlooms of imagination. Now for the quirky tidbit. Some Victorians marketed dream diaries as actual commercial products, complete with pre-printed prompts like, "What did you eat before bed?" and "Did the moon appear in your dream?" Imagine flipping through one and realizing it's essentially the 19th century version of a sleep app, except instead of syncing to your smartwatch, it just soaks up your ink and your questionable penmanship. And here's the funny part. While Victorians filled notebooks with earnest detail, they were also a little embarrassed by it. Some even locked their dream diaries away, fearing ridicule. After all, how do you explain to your stern father that last night you dreamed you were a cabbage being sold at market? As you leaf through these Victorian notebooks, you notice how consistent certain themes were. Flying, falling, being chased, same patterns we recognise today. The difference is in the interpretation. Victorians linked falling dreams to disturbances in the liver, or perhaps bad digestion, because obviously your spleen cares deeply about your aerial adventures. They also connected specific foods to dream quality. Eat cheese before bed, they warned, and prepare for nightmares. The irony? Modern science later confirmed that eating heavy meals before sleep can influence dream intensity. Score 1 for the Victorians and their digestive paranoia. Some journals reveal a darker side. Remember, this was an age haunted by tuberculosis, industrial accidents, and social upheaval. Dreams often reflected real anxieties: factories collapsing, trains derailing, loved ones disappearing. In many cases, the diaries read like hidden emotional outlets. Historians still argue whether this practice was proto-psychology, a way of self-analysing before Freud made it fashionable, or just another example of Victorian obsession with cataloguing everything under the sun. Let's not forget the amateur dream dictionaries that sprouted during this era. Publishers churned out volumes promising to decode your visions. Dream of teeth falling out, and you'll lose money. Dream of fish, and someone in your family will marry soon. The public bought these guides eagerly, flipping through them at breakfast tables as if they were stock reports. You can almost picture a banker adjusting his tie, muttering, "Well, I dreamed of an owl, so clearly I should avoid new investments today." And here's a moment of gentle humour. One particularly popular Victorian guide claimed that dreaming of a donkey meant unexpected travel. You imagine someone in 1875 waking up, jotting that down, and then being dragged on a surprise carriage ride to visit their in-laws. Not quite the exotic adventure they were hoping for. But beyond the oddities, there's something tender about these diaries. They reveal a human desire that hasn't changed. You want to make sense of the strange theatre your mind stages each night. Whether through ink and quill or digital apps, the urge to capture dreams remains constant. As you close one of those weathered journals, you can almost hear the scratching of countless pens across the century, each racing against dawn to preserve the fleeting worlds of sleep. The Victorians didn't solve the science of dreams, but they preserved enough fragments to inspire the next generation of researchers. And waiting in the shadows of this diary craze was a new voice, a man named Freud, who would take dreams from parlours and nightstands straight into the heart of psychology. You tuck away the last of those ink-stained Victorian journals and find yourself in a new study, one lined with towering bookshelves, cigar smoke curling lazily through the air. A heavy leather chair creaks as someone leans forward. Sigmund Freud, the man who practically trademarked the phrase, "Tell me about your dreams." And you realise the mood has shifted. No more whimsical diary entries about flying or cabbage transformations. Now dreams are serious business, dissected with the same intensity Victorians once reserved for tax ledgers. Freud's book, The Interpretation of Dreams, published in 1899, marked a turning point. He believed dreams were the royal road to the unconscious. In other words, your nightly visions weren't random. They were coded messages from the deepest corners of your psyche. Imagine Freud sitting across from you, beard neatly combed, notebook ready, as you explain how you dreamed of a giant sandwich chasing you down a hallway. He wouldn't laugh. He'd nod gravely, then point out that the sandwich symbolized repressed desires, probably linked to your unresolved feelings about your father. Mainstream fact. Freud's theories changed how the Western world thought about dreams. Before him, dreams were often seen as divine omens, biological quirks, or weird entertainment. After him, they became psychological puzzles. Historians still argue whether Freud genuinely unlocked something universal about the mind, or whether he simply projected his own obsessions, particularly his fixation on childhood and sexuality, onto every dream he encountered. The quirky tidbit. Freud was such a meticulous dream collector that he often analysed his own dreams. In fact, much of his famous book was filled with his personal nighttime visions, including one about his uncle's funeral pastries. Yes, really. You try not to laugh imagining Freud squinting at a croissant and thinking, the pastry represents mortality, and also envy. What made Freud compelling, and sometimes exasperating, was his insistence that every dream contained both a manifest content, the actual events and imagery, and a latent content, the hidden meaning. Dream you're climbing stairs. Manifest. Climbing stairs. Latent. Well, let's just say Freud often turned everything into a symbol for something you'd rather not discuss with your mother. His interpretations became notorious for veering into sexual territory, which made him both a cultural celebrity and a target of ridicule. You picture yourself as one of Freud's patients, stretched out on a fainting couch, describing last night's dream in hushed tones. Freud listens, scribbles notes, then casually informs you that your dream about riding a bicycle through Vienna actually symbolizes repressed rivalry with your sibling. You sit up, confused, wondering if maybe you just like bicycles. This is where Freud's brilliance and absurdity coexisted. His framework gave people permission to treat dreams as meaningful, even if his specific reading sometimes felt like overreach. And here's a gentle laugh. Freud often clashed with his peers over his interpretations, and one critic joked that if you dreamed of a cigar, Freud would say it symbolized something deeper, unless, of course, it was just a cigar. That quip still gets quoted today as shorthand for when someone overanalyzes. Historians still debate whether Freud's dream theories hold scientific weight, or whether they're best understood as a cultural phenomenon. After all, modern neuroscience doesn't back up the idea that dreams are secret messages from the unconscious. Yet Freud's impact lingers. Even now, when you wake from a vivid dream, part of you wonders, what does it mean? That's Freud whispering from a century ago. Beyond psychology, Freud's ideas bled into art and literature. Surrealists like Salvador Dalí adored his notion of dreams as gateways to hidden truths. Writers borrowed his imagery of dream work to fuel their novels. Pop culture adopted his language wholesale, so much so that today you'll hear someone casually say, "Oh, that's just my subconscious," without realizing they're echoing Freud. But Freud wasn't alone. His student-turned-rival, Carl Jung, would later expand on dreams in ways Freud could never have imagined. Where Freud saw repression and hidden desires, Jung saw archetypes and collective myths. The baton was about to be passed. For now, though, you leave Freud's smoky study, his heavy theories lingering like the scent of tobacco. You step out into the crisp air of the early 20th century, where Jung waits with his own notebook, ready to take dreams from individual neuroses into the vast landscape of human mythology. You close the door on Freud's smoky study and wander forward into a quieter space. Less cigars and stern beards, more mountain air and sweeping views of the Swiss Alps. Here sits Carl Jung, Freud's one-time protege who eventually broke away to chart his own course in the dream world. Where Freud saw repression, Jung saw patterns. Where Freud zeroed in on your awkward childhood, Jung zoomed out to humanity as a whole. To him, your dreams weren't just your personal drama, they were stitched into something much bigger, something he called the collective unconscious. Imagine settling into Jung's office in Zurich. Books line the walls, crystals and mandalas sit on shelves, and Jung himself leans forward, eyes glinting with a mix of curiosity and mystery. You describe a dream. Maybe you're wandering through a forest and stumble across a hooded figure offering you a golden key. Freud would have said, "Ah yes, your oppressed longing for authority figures." Jung? He'd nod thoughtfully and say, "That's an archetype, the wise old man, a symbol embedded in the psyche of all humanity." Suddenly your dream isn't just about you, it's about everyone, everywhere, across history. Mainstream fact. Jung's theory of archetypes, like the shadow, the hero, the anima and animus, reshaped the study of dreams in the early 20th century. He believed these recurring figures and motifs weren't random, but emerged from shared human experience. Historians still argue whether Jung uncovered something truly universal, or whether he cherry-picked myths and symbols to support his theory. The quirky tidbit. Jung didn't just analyse dreams, he practiced active imagination, a method where he would literally converse with dream figures in his waking hours. Picture Jung pacing his study, speaking out loud to a figure from his own dreams, jotting down what they said in his famous Red Book. It sounds eccentric, and it was, but it also became a cornerstone of his process. Imagine trying that yourself, asking the giant talking dog from your dream what advice it has, and writing down its response. It's both strange and oddly comforting. Jung was fascinated by the overlap between dreams and mythology. Flip through any culture's folklore and you'll see the same themes. Journeys into underworlds, battles with shadowy beasts, quests for treasure. For Jung, that wasn't coincidence. It was evidence that the human mind carried a shared set of story templates, a sort of narrative DNA. Dreams were your personal entry into that universal library. And here's a little joke to keep you awake. Imagine Jung scrolling through Netflix. He'd probably sigh and say, "Every show is the hero's journey, even that one about a talking sponge." Jung's approach also leaned toward healing. He saw dreams as guides, nudging you toward wholeness. If you kept dreaming about being chased, Jung might suggest that the pursuer wasn't just fear, it was a part of yourself you hadn't yet accepted. He encouraged people to integrate these shadow figures rather than suppress them. Easier said than done. Of course. Nobody likes inviting their nightmare monsters to tea. Historians still debate Jung's impact compared to Freud. Some argue Freud's focus on repression had more lasting scientific weight, while others believe Jung's emphasis on symbols and myth resonates more broadly in culture. What's certain is that Jung influenced fields far beyond psychology, filmmaking, literature, even video games echo his archetypes. Every time you recognise a mentor figure or a trickster in a story, you're brushing up against Jung. The cultural ripple effects were enormous. Surrealist artists adored Jung's mystical bent, and modern dream analysts still reference his archetypes. Self-help books borrow his language shamelessly. Even your own dreams might feel more meaningful once you recognise those patterns, whether you want them to or not. As you step out of Jung's office, the air feels different. His world of symbols and archetypes still hangs around you, like whispers from myth itself. But just beyond lies the modern laboratory, where men and women in white coats are less interested in wise old men, and more interested in electrodes, brainwaves, and whether cats dream about chasing mice. The age of myth is about to collide with the age of machines. You leave Jung's office, the Alpine breeze still clinging to your sleeves, and suddenly you hear a new sound, the gentle buzz of electricity, the click of switches, the hum of machines. You've stepped into the mid-20th century, where science has traded Freud's couches and Jung's archetypes for something far less poetic but far more measurable. Wires taped to heads. brainwaves scribbled on rolling paper, and sleep labs where dreams are no longer just whispered confessions but charted like weather patterns. Imagine yourself in one of these early laboratories. The walls are sterile white, clipboards line the counters, and in the centre sits a bed that looks both inviting and unnervingly clinical. A volunteer lies there with electrodes pasted to their scalp. Nearby, a researcher squints at an EEG machine, electroencephalography, the new miracle tool that captures electrical activity in the brain. The pen jerks across the page, translating invisible sparks into visible squiggles. And just like that, the mysterious theatre of the mind begins to leave footprints. Mainstream fact: it was in the 1950s that researchers like Eugenia Sarinsky and Nathaniel Kleitman discovered REM sleep, that peculiar state marked by rapid eye movements and heightened brain activity. They noticed that people woken during REM reported vivid dreams, while those roused from other stages often recalled nothing. This discovery revolutionized sleep science, proving that dreams weren't evenly scattered through the night, but clustered in rhythmic cycles. Historians still argue whether this was the single most important breakthrough in dream science, or merely the first step toward deeper mysteries. Now for the quirky tidbit. In those early labs, scientists literally had to sit by the bed all night and watch the sleepers' eyeballs dart beneath their lids. Forget Netflix marathons, this was a different kind of all-nighter. One assistant later admitted the job was both fascinating and extremely boring, like staring at a lava lamp for 8 hours while occasionally poking someone awake. You picture yourself volunteering. You're hooked up with wires, trying not to move, knowing that some grad student is watching your eyelids twitch. You fall asleep, drift into a dream about swimming through orange jello, only to be shaken awake by a researcher shouting, "You, quick! What were you dreaming?" You mumble, "Jello," then flop back down, leaving them with a confused data point. Welcome to science. The humour here is obvious. The same society that once interpreted dreams with candles and dream dictionaries now had teams of people in lab coats reduced to scribbling notes like subject reports flying in pyjamas. Progress, but progress with a side of comedy. The experiments didn't stop at observation. Some labs tried manipulating dreams. Researchers blasted sounds, spritzed smells, even tugged on blankets mid-sleep to see if the stimuli would sneak into the dream narrative. Sometimes it worked. Sleepers reported dreaming of thunderstorms after hearing static, or of perfume after a scent was puffed under their nose. Other times, the brain simply ignored it, too busy staging its own bizarre plays. Historians still debate how much these early labs actually revealed about meaning versus mechanics. They mapped cycles, confirmed REM, even charted the way brainwaves shifted like tides. But whether they brought us closer to understanding why we dream remained unsettled. Some argue the lab stripped dreams of their mystery, pinning butterflies to corkboards. Others believed it was the first step toward unlocking the mind's deepest vaults. And here's a gentle laugh for you. One report from the 1960s noted that test subjects sometimes got annoyed at being woken repeatedly and began fabricating dream reports just to get the scientists to leave them alone. Imagine the frustration. After hours of squiggles on paper, the researcher excitedly asks, "What did you see?" And the subject sighs, A dog, juggling bananas. Can I go back to sleep now?" Still, these sterile labs carried an air of wonder. For the first time, dreams weren't just stories. They were biological events tied to measurable rhythms. You could see their footprints in ink and electricity. That changed everything. Suddenly, psychologists, neurologists, and even philosophers had new data to chew on. As you step quietly out of the lab, past the humming EEG machines and stacks of dream transcripts, you sense where this is heading. Freud gave us meaning, Jung gave us myth, and now science is giving us cycles and data. The stage is set for even stranger experiments. Lucid dreamers who control their worlds, parapsychologists chasing dream telepathy, and researchers who start asking whether dreams can be shared or shaped. You slip out of the sterile hum of the early sleep labs and almost immediately feel the atmosphere change. The wires and white coats are still here, but now there's a flicker of excitement, a gleam in researchers' eyes that hints at something more than passive observation. You're entering the world of lucid dreaming experiments, where the question isn't just, what do people dream? But, can dreamers know they're dreaming and even steer the ship? Imagine lying in a lab bed again, electrodes pasted to your head. But this time the instructions are different. You're told, if you realize you're dreaming, move your eyes left, right as a signal. That's the code, the proof. You drift off, find yourself standing in a surreal city where the buildings bend like melted wax. And suddenly you think, wait a second, this is a dream. You remember the code, flick your dream eyes side to side and back in the waking world. The researcher gasps as the EEG traces the movement. For the first time, science confirms that lucid dreamers can communicate from inside their dreams. Mainstream fact, in the late 1970s and early 1980s, researchers like Keith Hearn in the UK and Stephen LaBerge at Stanford pioneered controlled lucid dream experiments. Their eye movement signals became a milestone, proving that consciousness could exist within REM sleep. Historians still argue whether this discovery represented a scientific breakthrough or simply a confirmation of what dreamers had claimed for centuries. A quirky tidbit. Some early lucid dreamers were asked to perform tasks in their dream worlds, like singing, solving math problems, or even doing squats, while their breathing and heart rate were monitored. Picture someone in bed, twitching slightly, while in their dream they're competing in a surreal Olympics. At least one subject later confessed he got distracted by dream scenery and forgot the math problem entirely. Classic human nature, even while unconscious. You imagine yourself in that position, soaring above a dream landscape, suddenly aware that you're the one holding the controls. Do you waste the chance solving algebra, or do you go full superhero and fly over glowing oceans? The temptation is obvious. And maybe, just maybe, that explains why compliance in these experiments was sometimes inconsistent. Lucid dreaming raised uncomfortable questions. If you can be conscious while dreaming, then what is the line between waking and sleeping states? Could you train yourself to live a second life each night, one where you explore fantasies, solve creative problems, or confront your fears? Some enthusiasts thought so. Whole manuals appeared, teaching dream induction techniques, wake-back-to-bed methods, reality checks, even using flashing lights to remind the sleeper that they were dreaming. Historians still debate whether lucid dreaming represents a higher state of consciousness or just a quirk of REM awareness. Skeptics argue it's not as common or controllable as enthusiasts claim, but the idea refuses to die. Even today, lucid dreaming communities swap tips online, promising freedom in dream worlds if only you practice enough. Of course, the lab tests had their comic moments. Imagine a researcher explaining to their supervisor, yes, the subject signaled lucidity successfully, then spent the next 10 minutes trying to eat as much dream cake as possible. Or the classic frustration, subjects waking up at the exact moment they became lucid, like realizing you've won the lottery only to misplace the ticket. But the experiments also hinted at possibilities beyond fun. Some subjects reported using lucid dreams to confront nightmares, rehearse skills, or spark creativity. A pianist described practicing pieces in dreams and waking with improved memory of the notes. Was it placebo? Maybe. Was it intriguing? Definitely. You leave the lab once more, eyes flicking back and forth as though carrying the secret signal yourself. Ahead lies an even stranger branch of sleep science. The fringe corners where researchers stop asking about lucidity and begin chasing telepathy, precognition, and dreams that might spill beyond the boundaries of the individual mind. You walk away from the lucid dream labs, their blinking monitors still glowing in your mind, and find yourself entering a dimmer, yet stranger space, one that smells faintly of incense and coffee-stained notebooks. Here, the researchers aren't just measuring brain waves or testing algebra problems in dreamscapes. No, this is the fringe frontier, where dreams are treated as portals, possible bridges between minds, maybe even glimpses of the future. It's the era of parapsychological dream experiments, and whether you find it thrilling or absurd depends on how much you're willing to suspend disbelief at 3 a.m. Picture a basement lab in the 1960s at the Maimonides Medical Center in Brooklyn. A subject is tucked into bed, wired for EEG, while down the hall another volunteer stares at a randomly chosen art print, say, a Picasso sketch, trying to send the image telepathically into the dreamer's mind. The dreamer tosses, mumbles, and later, when woken, describes a dream about distorted faces and geometric shapes. The researchers cheer. That's basically Picasso. To skeptics, it's flimsy evidence. To believers, it's a breakthrough, proof that dreams might be channels for telepathy. Mainstream fact: the Maimonides dream telepathy experiments, led by Montague Ullman and Stanley Krippner in the 1960s-70s, became famous in parapsychology circles. They reported above-chart success in dreamers describing target images. Historians still argue whether these results were genuine anomalies, clever but flawed statistics, or simply wishful thinking amplified by the era's fascination with ESP. Now for the quirky tidbit. One subject, tasked with receiving an image of a snowy mountain scene, dreamed instead of being stuck in a refrigerator. The researchers noted the symbolic connection. You can't help but laugh, imagining the dreamer muttering, "I'm freezing in here," while the sender thinks, "Close enough, we'll take it." You picture yourself as the sleeper, electrodes tugging at your scalp while someone you've never met stares at a postcard across the hall. You wake, groggy, and mutter, "I dreamed about a giant fish." Turns out the target image was the Great Wave off Kanagawa. The researchers exchange knowing looks, jot notes, and whisper about synchronicity. Meanwhile, you're just annoyed you didn't get to finish your sushi. Historians still debate whether the Maimonides results were solid science or products of small sample sizes and generous interpretations. Later replication attempts mostly failed, but the idea stuck in the cultural imagination. People wanted to believe dreams could reach beyond the skull, that maybe we tap into something collective each night. The fascination didn't stop there. Others explored precognitive dreams, hunting for evidence that the sleeping mind glimpses future events. Anecdotes abound. Someone dreams of a plane crash, and the next morning, headlines confirm it. Skeptics point out that coincidences are inevitable in a world where thousands of flights take off daily. But to the dreamer, the timing feels uncanny, even spooky. And here's a gentle laugh. One parapsychologist once recounted a subject dreaming of winning the lottery. The next day, they did buy a ticket, only to win just $2, technically a hit, but not exactly psychic glory. Still, the notion that dreams might carry messages across time or space fascinated not just researchers but artists, writers, and ordinary people. Whole books were written cataloguing precognitive dream stories, fueling the idea that sleep unlocked hidden senses. Even mainstream psychologists had to tiptoe around the topic, acknowledging that while most claims lacked scientific backing, the cultural hunger for mystery was undeniable. You sense that what's important here isn't whether the data truly proved telepathy or precognition. It's that these experiments pushed boundaries, daring to ask questions traditional science wouldn't touch. They kept alive the sense that dreams were more than random noise, that they might brush against something larger. As you step back from the incense and excitement of the parapsychology labs, you notice the landscape shifting again. Ahead lie quieter, more clinical corridors, where mainstream neuroscience will reclaim the field, grounding dreams firmly in biology, but never fully snuffing out the wilder theories that still linger like smoke in the corners of the mind. You leave behind the parapsychology rooms, their faint incense and hopeful whispers fading, and step into the polished corridors of a late 20th century neuroscience. The air here smells not of mystery, but of disinfectant and circuitry. White coats shuffle between rooms filled with humming machines. Wires dangle, electrodes gleam, and clipboards overflow with graphs. Here, the dream is no longer a mystical message or psychic signal. It is a measurable phenomenon, unfolding in real time across the brain. This is where electroencephalography, EEG, first tested in the 1920s but perfected decades later, becomes the main tool. You see a subject reclining on a narrow bed, their head covered in a strange cap dotted with silver sensors. A green line scribbles across a monitor, spiking when the subject's eyes twitch beneath closed lids. Scientists lean forward, murmuring, REM. At last, they have a window into the hidden rhythms of dreaming. The discovery of REM sleep in 1953 by Eugene Asorinsky and Nathaniel Kleitman marked a turning point. Suddenly, dreams were not scattered, mysteries but biological events tied to predictable cycles. Each night, you drift into REM multiple times, your body paralyzed while your mind bursts into chaotic, vivid imagery. To lie in this lab as a subject is to know that your private visions are being charted on paper and film, as if your inner life were an experiment waiting to be decoded. A quirky moment from these labs, researchers often had to rouse subjects at precise times to collect dream reports. Imagine being shaken awake at 3:17 by a clipboard-wielding grad student asking, "What were you dreaming just now?" You mumble something about a giant sandwich chasing you down the street. The student nods gravely, jotting it down as data. Somewhere in an archive, there may still be charts solemnly linking REM spikes with dreams of enormous pastrami. This was also the era of sleep deprivation studies. Scientists wondered what would happen if REM was repeatedly interrupted. Volunteers were woken every time their eyes began to dart beneath closed lids. After days of broken rest, the subjects became irritable, paranoid, even hallucinated. One famously begged to be allowed just one uninterrupted dream cycle, comparing the deprivation to torture. The conclusion was clear: dreaming isn't a luxury, it's vital for mental balance. As technology advanced, so did ambition. Brain imaging, PET scans, and later fMRI allowed researchers to peek at which regions lit up during dreams. The visual cortex fired as if the dreamer were truly seeing. Emotional centers glowed brighter than in waking life, but logic centers, often muted, which explained why absurd dream scenarios seemed perfectly reasonable until morning. Here's a softer, human detail. Some researchers themselves became so fascinated by the dream reports that they began keeping personal dream journals. One neuroscientist admitted that after months of waking subjects for data, he too began waking in the night, scribbling down his own wild imagery. Science had invaded his sleep, and sleep had quietly invaded his science. The work of this period shifted dreams from the mystical to the medical. They became tools for understanding memory consolidation, emotional processing, even trauma recovery. Nightmares were no longer demons at the bedside, but possible signals of stress pathways in the brain. Dreams, once divine messages or psychic transmissions, were now recognized as biological therapy sessions your mind performs nightly. You pause here, realizing the irony. The more the labs illuminated, the more dreamers still felt their visions resist complete explanation. Electrodes could measure rhythms, scans could map regions, yet no machine could capture the texture of riding a dragon through clouds or hearing a lost loved one's voice in perfect clarity. The mystery remained intact, tucked safely within the folds of REM. And as you drift out of these sterile yet wondrous laboratories, you see the path ahead twist once more. For if neuroscience made dreams material, technology soon dared to make them interactive. A new generation would try not just to record, but to steer the dream from inside. Like pilots navigating their own subconscious skies, You step into the final decades of the 20th century and the early 21st, where science and technology collide with sleep in bold new ways. No longer satisfied with simply measuring dreams, researchers and tinkerers begin to ask, can we actually influence them? This is the world of dream engineering, where strange devices beep on nightstands and ambitious scientists promise you'll soon be able to choose your own nightly adventures. Picture yourself slipping on a dream mask in the 1980s. It looks like a clunky pair of ski goggles wired with tiny lights. The idea, pioneered by Stephen LaBerge and his team, was that the mask would detect when you entered REM and then flash lights across your closed eyelids. The subtle cue would drift into your dream and remind you, hey, you're dreaming. Suddenly, instead of floating helplessly through whatever your brain concocts, you might grab the wheel. Mainstream fact: LaBerge's Nova Dreamer device was marketed as the first consumer gadget for lucid dreaming, combining REM detection with cueing systems. It didn't always work, but it laid the groundwork for wearable sleep tech decades before Fitbits and smartwatches. Historians still argue whether such devices are genuinely effective or if they mostly capitalize on wishful thinking. A quirky tidbit: some of the early prototypes used sound cues instead of lights, gentle beeps or even recorded phrases like, "You are dreaming," whispered into the sleeper's ears. Testers reported mixed results. One said he became lucid after hearing the voice in his dream, but it was coming from a talking toaster. Another swore the beeping turned into an alarm clock in his dream, waking him in frustration. Proof, perhaps, that the subconscious has a wicked sense of humour. By the 2000s, more sophisticated experiments began. Neuroscientists tested whether targeted memory reactivation, playing sounds associated with learning tasks, could reinforce memory during sleep. For example, if you practice piano with a certain melody playing, and the same tune was softly played while you slept, you might wake up with slightly better skills. Some studies suggested measurable gains. Imagine cramming for an exam with headphones on, then hoping your brain keeps revising the material overnight. Not exactly magic, but close. At the more speculative edges, researchers toyed with direct brain stimulation. Small electrical currents delivered through the scalp appeared to increase the likelihood of lucid dreams in some trials. The sight of volunteers wearing electrode caps while dozing might look like science fiction. But the underlying idea was straightforward: nudge the brain into a state where self-awareness could flicker alive inside the dream. Historians still debate the ethics of dream manipulation. Is it harmless fun, or are we meddling in processes we barely understand? Some critics warned of possible side effects: disrupted sleep, increased anxiety, or dependence on gadgets. Others argued that shaping dreams could open doors to therapy, treating PTSD nightmares, easing insomnia, or rehearsing skills safely in a controlled mental environment. Of course, not every attempt was serious. Companies marketed apps that promised to hack your dreams by playing soothing soundscapes or personalized story prompts as you drifted off. Reviews were mixed at best. One user claimed it gave them recurring dreams of giant ducks. Another said it simply drained their phone battery. The dream marketplace, it turned out, was as unpredictable as the dream world itself. But beneath the gimmicks, something profound shimmered. For the first time, humans weren't just dreamers or observers, they were experimenters inside their own subconscious. You can almost feel the shift as you walk through these labs and bedrooms turned mini-studios. Dreams are no longer just recorded, they're sculpted, rehearsed, coaxed into new forms. You leave this era with a strange thought humming in your head. If technology keeps evolving, will the future hold designer dreams, downloadable, customizable, maybe even shared? The line between natural sleep and curated imagination feels thinner than ever, and with that unsettling possibility, you step forward toward the cutting edge where neuroscience, AI, and philosophy begin to merge. You slip into the present moment, where the glowing screens in labs and bedrooms feel eerily familiar. Sleep research no longer belongs only to dusty journals or fringe inventors. It's woven into daily life through wearables, apps, and even artificial intelligence. You glance down at your wrist. A smartwatch counts not just your steps, but your minutes in REM, deep and light sleep. The hum of technology follows you even into bed, and dreams are now another dataset in the cloud. Mainstream fact: consumer sleep trackers have become a booming market, with millions relying on rings, watches, and headbands that estimate their cycles using motion sensors and heart rate variability. Historians still argue whether these devices are accurate or if they merely approximate what true lab polysomnography measures. But accuracy aside, they've transformed sleep into something quantifiable, something you can compare to your friends on social media. Imagine bragging. "I got more REM than you last night," a badge of honor in a world obsessed with metrics. The quirky tidbit. Some apps now offer dream journals with AI companions, which analyze your typed entries each morning. A handful even claim to detect recurring themes: your ex, your teeth falling out, those weird airport chases, and suggest what they might mean. One unlucky user reported the app insisted all his dreams were about spaghetti, even when they clearly weren't. Maybe the AI was just hungry. You look around the labs of today, fMRI machines hum, electrodes still cling to scalps. But now machine learning algorithms sift through terabytes of data, hunting for correlations between dream imagery and brain activation patterns. Some researchers even train AIs to reconstruct visual fragments of dreams from neural activity. The results look blurry and surreal, like paintings half melted in rain. Yet they suggest a future where your private midnight cinema could, in theory, be streamed. Creepy, fascinating, probably both. Historians still debate whether decoding dreams with AI is ethically acceptable. Would employers ever demand dream reports? Could governments misuse such tech? Or is it all overhyped, destined to remain in the uncanny valley of neuroscience? The questions buzz louder than the machines themselves. Meanwhile, therapists explore dream rehearsal therapy with virtual reality. PTSD patients can rehearse different dream outcomes in VR simulations while awake, hoping it reshapes their nightmares. Athletes experiment with visualizing movements in pre-sleep states, blurring the line between waking practice and dream training. Even wellness influencers jump aboard, selling courses on dream manifestation, promising you'll attract success by curating your subconscious with nightly affirmations. Not all is serious, though. Some Reddit threads gleefully share attempts to co-op dreams using group audio cues. Friends record silly phrases like giant rubber chicken or disco wizard, then play them at low volume while they sleep, reporting back which dreamer's subconscious picked up the nonsense. The results read like a surrealist art show, half ridiculous, half oddly profound. You feel the weight of all these possibilities pressing around you, the playful, the therapeutic, the invasive. Dreams, once fleeting and private, now hover on the edge of becoming collective data. Will the future bring dream-sharing networks, curated playlists of subconscious adventures, even downloadable dream DLC packs? The notion isn't science fiction anymore, it's a matter of funding, ethics, and time. And yet, as you imagine your dreams becoming one more thing tracked, analysed, and optimised, you can't help but wonder, will the mystery survive, or will the magic of the dream dissolve once every flicker of the subconscious is mapped and monetised? That uneasy tension follows you as you step closer to the finale, where the history of dream science gives way to the timeless fact of simply sleeping. You feel the years stretch out beneath your feet, the whole winding history of dream science trailing behind like footprints in shifting sand, from ancient diviners burning incense to 19th century philosophers scribbling theories by candlelight, to modern neuroscientists peering into the humming glow of MRI scanners. You've walked the spectrum of human attempts to catch the uncatchable. And now, in this quiet moment, You lie down at the edge of the story itself. Dream research today straddles paradox. On one hand, it's more advanced than ever. Brain imaging can capture blood flow as you dream. Algorithms can guess whether you're picturing a face or a landscape. Sleep clinics track every twitch, every snore, every skipped breath. But on the other hand, dreams remain slippery. The exact why you dream of a lost house, why you relive an old argument, why your subconscious casts your math teacher as a dragon, escapes clear explanation. Historians still argue whether dreams serve evolutionary survival, creative problem-solving, or nothing more than a nightly brain defrag. The quirky tidbit. Even among today's hyper-serious labs, there are playful side projects. One group tested whether kittens in REM sleep might practice hunting through tiny paw twitches. Another graduate student confessed that their best dream data came not from meticulous design, but from accidentally dozing off during their own shift and being woken by the EEG beeping. Proof that science, too, sometimes snores on the job. And so you're left with an odd, comforting truth. Despite centuries of study, the dream remains partly unknowable. You can measure its rhythms, track its chemistry, even poke at it with technology. But the core experience, the surreal cinema that belongs only to you each night, resists capture. In a world obsessed with answers, maybe that's a blessing. The lights of the laboratories dim, the chanting priests of ancient temples fade, the lucid dreamers fall back into ordinary REM. The whole noisy parade of history grows soft, like distant footsteps sinking into sand. What remains is simple: you, a bed, a night sky outside, and a dream waiting to unfold. And now, as you settle deeper into your own mattress, let the science fade into the background. Feel your body grow heavier, like a stone sinking gently into calm water. The rhythm of your breath smooths out, slow and effortless. Every inhale is a tide coming in, every exhale a tide rolling away, leaving you quieter, lighter, emptier. Imagine the clutter of the day, screens, voices, worries, dissolving into mist. Each thought drifts away like a paper lantern released into the night. Far off, you sense the dream frontier, soft and glowing, waiting without judgment, without hurry. There is no need to grasp at it. Just let it arrive in its own time, like a friend tapping lightly at your shoulder. Your eyelids may already feel heavy. That's fine. Let them. Behind them, shapes may flicker, colours ripple, fragments of memory tumble into nonsense. Smile at it, the way you smile at a fire's sparks drifting upward. No need to interpret. No need to control. Trust that your mind knows what to do, weaving the night's tapestry in threads of memory and imagination. The hum of the world grows dim, replaced by something softer, your own heartbeat, the faint rustle of fabric, the whisper of breath in your chest. You're safe here, and you are allowed to let go. So drift now. Drift into the river of sleep that carries everyone, scholar and mystic alike. Drift into the mystery that no experiment can fully explain. Dream freely and dream deeply. Good night.